I start every single day pretty much the same way that incorporates a little bit of mental health, spiritual health, and physical health. And it's because I've really suffered in my life. I've suffered with depression, I've suffered with feeling like I wasn't enough, and going through different traumas throughout my life. It's caused me to really do the deeper work, being very mindful and intentional of creating a life that I desire instead of living in the past, in my past pains or past traumas. The best way that I can be of service is to first and foremost take care of my own energy and my own vibration, because that's what I'm giving in the world. So,
I love that you finished with this actually about the higher vibration because that's something that I really want to focus on with you. It's something that we all sense, but maybe some of us are a little less tapped into, and we're not doing the practices you're talking about that really allow you to conserve and grow that energy. But there was something you mentioned first about it was a passing comment. You said something about how not living in the past anymore, and that really stuck with me because I think a lot of us are doing that we're in the present day, right? The past has happened, but the behaviors and the mindsets are coming with us from before. Can you share a little bit about your own experience with that? What you meant by that? What has changed for you?
it's almost like peeling off pieces of myself from the past, because we're always on this journey of growth. And when we first put ourselves out there, it's like, I'm the me who you all think I am in your life and who I have been. But each and every time I show up and each and every time I serve at a higher level and all the inner work that I'm doing, I'm kind of like letting go of that Emily, like that part of me, that version of me, and I'm stepping into that next level. And so when I mean like, and it will like how it relates to vibration is, so when we are tapped into our higher self, when we're tapped into that and we feel joy and freedom and prosperity, like all of that yumminess, that might not be a vibrational match for where we are today. And so we have to let go of the vibrational match where we are today so that we can feel that higher state. And it's not like living in a pretend world. It's like, thank you so much, Emily, from today for being here, getting me to where I am, working through all that stuff. And wow, that was tough. And that relationship and that bad choice and all that stuff. Like, I'm grateful for who I've been because it's gotten me to this place, but ultimately, I'm not looking backwards saying I'd like to go back there. I'm looking forward saying this is where I'm growing into. And so when I'm looking to grow, and whether it's making a bigger impact or making more money, I am looking at, where am I kind of stopping myself? What are some beliefs? What are some stories? What are some of the things that have been passed down generationally? And I talk a lot about money blocks with my clientele. So things like money doesn't grow on trees. It's subconsciously that they've been ingrained in our mind, but also through our DNA, through our lineage, ancestrally. Like, we are just living, breathing versions of our ancestors that suffered all those years ago. And so that's part of it, is like, when I'm growing, I'm opening up to achieving a better life and more vitality and more health and well-being. I'm also uncovering the places that don't align with that, that need the deeper healing. I do whatever it takes to clear the road, clear out what's blocking me from the life I desire. Some of these daily practices really help me to embody my higher self, because when I like I said, when you close your eyes and you envision that life, like, what is she doing? How is she behaving? How is she waking up in the day? What is she doing? How is she feeling about herself and her life and her work? Like, when does she start her day? When does she end her day? What does she do for work? Like, it's so easy. It's honestly, it's that easy to get a checklist of how to live your best life, is tune into your higher self and just be like, all right, what does the day in the life of your higher self look like? She's going to give you a checklist. Here's 20 things that's going to make you feel and look and act and attract your best. It's your choice today if you want to do them.
The one thing you're bringing back again and again is the higher version of you is not the same as the past version you've been obsessing with. And I just want to make that clear as people are listening that it's so different in choices and behavior. But continue. I love this small application.
Yeah, it's that easy. I think, you
Yeah.
know, I think part of making that distinction of what's right for you is knowing yourself. And sometimes we're so lost and it's too scary to slow down and to get to know ourselves and to get in touch with pain and trauma and look at like the old boo-boos that have stopped us, or they are triggering us to behave and eat and act in different ways. But it's actually when we look at those things and we get really in touch with ourselves that a lot of times you just notice like, well, that relationship or that food or that exercise or that activity, like that just doesn't feel right anymore. And, the first thing that starts to happen, unfortunately, when we start to really get to know ourselves is relationships start to change. You might have that friend that you've been friends with for 10 years, 20 years, and you're like, how I can't even sit across the table at dinner with this person anymore because, like, I literally have nothing to say to them, and everything that they say to me is draining every piece and ounce of my life force energy, and I just can't. And it's not a bad thing. It's not that they're a bad person or they're trying to do harm. It's just that vibrationally, it's like you're at a different level, not better or worse, just a different level. And it's time to find people who are the same resonance.
When you're going for this higher version of yourself, it's the small little incremental things like what you would eat. I think that's such a great way to think about it because when you're envisioning this, grander version of yourself, it can seem overwhelming and so
Mhm.
different from where you are. But when you think of these as small incremental choices, like what would I eat for breakfast? That's not so difficult. And if you're doing those small incremental changes in multiple areas, then it has that magnifying effect. But then you also
Totally.
said there's some of those big shifts like dropping relationships. And that is frustrating and heartbreaking and difficult because you
Mhm.
realize that time together is not an indicator of, vibrancy
Yeah.
or vibrational match.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. And when we break it down to just like simple choices, every decision we make is either in alignment with our higher self or not. This isn't me saying like I only eat salads and drink green juice because that is the only thing that my higher self. No, actually recently I had a really deep spiritual like healing this week, and I was like, I need all of the carbs that you can throw into my face. And I think that's a big thing with a lot of people is we spend a lot of time overthinking and analyzing and, like, asking 2 to 20 friends about what they think about that situation, of course.
True. And if you've asked people more than 10 times about a decision you have to make, you probably already know the answer.
Right.
You probably know what you really want. You're just searching for someone to give you an out
Yes.
or to validate it.
They're looking for a signier sign.
I think this is great because you've segued into one of the big topics for today, which is this higher self and what that means for people because I think it can feel a little nebulous sometimes, especially for those who are maybe just starting to get more into their personal and spiritual growth. Can you define as much as it is possible, because I know it's challenging, what that means to be in your higher self, what that might include for people or what it might not include?
Maybe it's easier just to bring people into that space for themselves right now. Close your eyes and connect with just a beautiful beam of white healing light and just surround yourself in that space so that it cleanses your space, your body, your energy field with pure white healing light. And then just call in your higher self. I call in my highest self, that part of me that's here for living my best life, more joy, my most abundant life, my most joyful life. And just tap into that energy. And whether you see, feel, sense, or imagine that, it is. And for some of the left brainer folks who are like, I don't know if that's really it, whatever you're imagining, whatever's coming to you, really, that is it. And so when you sense that, notice how your body immediately kind of feels when you tap into your highest potential, your happiest life, happy ever after, what that looks like. If you get a sense of where that is, what's around you, and maybe even how you feel, how you look. Bring your attention to any little detail that pops up for you. And so when you feel that and you sense that and you imagine that, there is this place of expansion that happens in your body. And that vibration that shows you what happily ever after looks and feels like, that is your higher self. And so if you want to just take a moment to get any information that comes up for you, that's great. And when you're ready, you can come all the way back into your physical body and back into the space and blink your eyes open. When we connect with our higher self, that is the part of us that has knowing. It's the part of us that has clear vision, clear sound, and these are also how we tap into our quote unquote psychic senses. These are innate. We all have intuition. We all have this knowing, whether we identify that we do or we don't, you do. It's been scientifically proven that within 3 seconds of walking into a room, you can pick up on the energy inside of it. Like we've all done it, we all feel it. And so the more that you connect with that part of you, the stronger those senses become. Like, actually, intuition is kind of like a muscle that the more you practice, the stronger it gets. You know, if you want to get stronger intuitively and connecting with your higher self more often, you've got to listen. You know, if you we've all had that friend that's like been in a bad relationship and they keep asking you, right, for advice. And you keep giving them advice and they don't do anything with it. But that's the metaphor of, like, your intuition. Like, your intuition is telling you these things all the time. Like, that's the problem, is that we're always getting signs and signals. And so the distinction is, you know, people ask, how do I tell the difference between my own thoughts versus my intuition or my higher self? It's one in the same. And so your higher self is always that loving nudge, the first instinctual sound, voice, feeling that you get. And then the second one is your logical brain, your left brain that's gonna kick in with like, "Is that was that me? Is that logical? Does that make sense?" And it's gonna talk you out of things usually. So, the more that I listen to that first voice of like, "Here's an idea," the stronger that gets. And so that's literally how I've lived my life, listening to that, how I've run relationships, and my business is completely run through my intuition, and it's never steered me wrong. But the thing is about intuition and your higher self is that you have to be quiet to listen to it. And so a lot of us avoid meditation, we avoid silence, we avoid stillness. And so what I recommend is just taking 1 minute every day just to do some deep breathing, to get quiet, and just simply ask yourself, is there any information I require today? Just after a couple of days, you actually do have more of a strengthening of your own inner guidance, and it will lead you to some wonderful things in your life and away from other things, I suppose.
I think the away from other things is big, but it's also the intentionality of it is so important that you're saying that it might seem like such a small, inconsequential thing to say, let me take a minute every morning and just check in. But if you're not doing that, then when are you doing it? And it's that muscle that you talked about, which was such a good comparison because I think with, my fitness background about how if you don't use certain muscles, they do go weaker. They
Mm,
start getting compensations. You don't move as efficiently
mhm, and
because you're not
atrophy. Think
regularly
about
they
that.
atrophy. Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's the same with intuition. You're completely right that if you're not exercising it, if you're not checking in, then that is gonna be more difficult for you. And it's this is the next question for you because I think it leads really beautifully into this, which is everything you're talking about, ignoring intuition. You know you should grab that umbrella, but you don't. Or
Mhm,
a bigger thing, you know you shouldn't go out with that person, but you do.
mhm,
Um, it's all this you feel the resistance but you
mhm.
still allow yourself to be taken with it. Can you talk a little bit about this idea of creating ease in your life versus
Yeah.
the resistance and how that relates to abundance?
I like to use the phrase, "I love myself too much to," and then dot, dot, dot. So sometimes it's, "I love myself too much to go to that event that I'm really too tired for." It's this place of not loving yourself that you torture yourself. If you looked at it as like a two-person relationship, like, how are you treating them? Are you listening to them? Are you taking good care of them? Are you spoiling them? The root of it is self-love. I think that most people, when they find themselves on a wellness journey, they are discovering how to love themselves as well.
Pursuing your higher self and realizing that is about creating ease in your life versus
Yeah,
resistance, and how that's about abundance. And I think you
yeah,
started with the
yeah,
self-love, which makes sense, but if you wanna go deeper into what it looks like when you have that kind of life of more ease, mental,
yeah,
emotional ease and
yeah.
flow.
I'll explain that with actually analogy that I learned reading a book. Now I can't remember which book it was, but it was Esther Hicks, and she's channeling Abraham, and one of the ways that they described this place of resistance or ease, our vibration naturally, innately, like our higher self, innately, our vibration is love, the highest vibration. And if we imagine that we are like a little wine bottle cork, if you put the cork on into water, it's going to automatically float to the top. That's the vibration that we have. We're automatically going to vibrate so high we float on the top. But in this human experience, we have our own limitations, our own doubts. We talked about ancestral trauma. We've talked about these lives that we've lived. And what happens is that our natural state, our natural buoyant state becomes a bit heavy. Our resistance is like pushing the cork under the water, and so the more we're pushing against our own vibration, it's slowing down the process of manifesting. It's not keeping us in this state of ease and allowance. We're not allowing ourselves to pop up. We're pushing it down with all the things that we're, you know, living with, which is our own self doubt, our fears, our worries, anxieties. Like the best way to become more abundant and more, I guess, buoyant in this circumstance is to come back to our natural state of feeling good. So I think that ties into love because the more you love yourself, the more you're focused on feeling good, the more good feelings you have, the more buoyant and abundant you become.
This is a beautiful analogy. It's so perfect because when you're listening, you can think of each of the thoughts or each of the actions that you're continually doing that bring you under that water and how heavy it feels. It feels heavy when
Yeah.
you're living with those. And imagine how much strength people must have. The more resistance they're living with every day, slogging through to keep
Mhm.
doing it. It's
Mhm.
exhausting.
It is exhausting. And it's like, we get ourselves to a point where we might burn ourselves out because of all of the weight. And typically, when you burn yourself out, you go back to the number one question, which is what is actually making me happy? What brings me joy? Like, this doesn't feel good. And sometimes, you know, the contrast is so helpful of not feeling good, not being happy, not being abundant. That contrast is helping us to know our edges. Like, what I don't like is this. But the problem is sometimes we focus so much on what we don't like in that past, like we were talking about earlier, that we don't get to project how good we want to feel. And that good feeling state is what brings it to our life now. It is these incremental things, but the more we feel good, the more we are just easily, effortlessly allowing things into our existence.
It's interesting too, because if you think about it, the more you do these small things you're talking about that make you happy, the less tolerance you have for the things that don't, and the less for the BS and the people and the actions.
Totally. Totally. And that's the best part because when you are true to yourself and you are so aligned, like if you invited me to come over and I don't want to come over, I am going to say not today, but thank you so much for inviting me. And when I show up, you're going to get me 100%. I'm going to be like in the best energy ever. It's like you literally cannot make me do things I don't want to do or say yes to things I do not want to do.
I'm gonna ask you a final question on this because this brings up a really important thing that some people listening might be so far from that stage. I feel the same as you. I'm like, I'm not gonna do it if it doesn't feel good to do today. But I know there are people listening where that's a bit more of a struggle for them to do. For
Mm.
whatever reason, they're more concerned about what people will think or they've been raised that way. What is kind of the smallest tiny little shift do you think for you or for people you've seen in getting to that point where you can really assert what makes you happy?
Honestly, making a list so that you're also visually seeing it in front of you, these things that make me happy. And again, like I shared at the beginning, I have struggled with depression and stress and anxiety and drama. Like, I'm not coming from like the perfect land of everything is happy. I would say the first step would be really to write down what does make you happy. It's really easy to know what you don't like. It really, really is. I used to do this exercise back when I was dating, like in my 20s, of like if I wanted a new person to date, and I would write down like as if I was ordering them from a catalog. I would like him to look like this and to act like this and to treat me this way and to do these nice things and to be very present with me based on my previous partner. And if they had lack or deficiencies that I was like, I can't live with that again. So I would be like, okay, they're like aloof. I want someone who is attentive to my needs and very present with me, right? So it might be easier at first to write down all the things that you don't like, but then I would say write the opposite of it in the next column. Like, okay, so you know you don't like that thing. I don't like this job. I would love to have a job where I work part-time from home, I had a flexible schedule, and I loved everyone I work with. Oh, okay. So that's gonna help to get clarity because sometimes we're so much in the muck that we really can only see what we see. And so sometimes a list of opposites is really helpful. So maybe take a piece of paper, fold it in half the long way. Left hand column is what I do not like. The right hand column is all the opposite of that thing. The next thing I would invite people to do is when they're in a situation where they're really unhappy to really understand why. And this kind of introspection that happens is like, what is it specifically that I don't like about it? And, let's just say a job, for example, because a lot of people are unhappy in their jobs. So, is it the pay? Is it the people you work with? Is it the location? Is it the commute? What is it specifically? Because you might find that like it's not even any of those things. It's just like the company feels like really immoral. You don't like the nature of the business, but like you love your coworkers, the commute's easy and you get paid well. Like so it's really good to kind of like get dissect it almost, like, what is the root of what I don't like so much that I want to change? And when you get really clear on that, then new things open. So, I'll share an example. So, one of my friends is, she's been working for this woman for about a year. She's another entrepreneur, really successful woman. And she's like the top person in like gluten-free eating. And she is just like well known. So it seems like a pretty cool gig to have working. And she's like operations manager, runs everything in the business, and like has a really high profile kind of job. And she was noticing like she wasn't really loving it so much and it was draining her. And she started writing down on a piece of paper, like, she wanted to get some change, but she didn't know what it was. And she started doing the same thing. She knew all the things she didn't like about the job. So she was writing all down. I don't like this. I don't like this. The hours are terrible. The stress is ridiculous. Da, da, da. So she went on and on. And then she's like, you know what? This doesn't make sense because this is not what I want. And so again, on the other page, she started writing down, this would be my dream job. And so she wrote down, it would look like this, and this. I would work with these types of people. This is what my pay would be, etc. Well, she gave her notice to the job that she wasn't so happy with, and within about 3 hours, she happened to see a job posting for this job that she basically just wish list. She gets the job. She gets the job. It is half of the hours with more pay. It is everything on her wish list. So this is the power of when you get really clear with your intention. The problem is that we are so clear with what we don't want and we totally obsess about it. And we just keep getting more of what we don't want. We're such manifestors. Like I saw this ad of some woman was like, "I'm the queen of manifesting." I was like, "That's like saying I'm the queen of breathing." Like, what is that? Because that kind of messaging makes us feel separate. Like, oh, if she's the queen, then I must be a piece of shit or whatever it is. Like, I don't know what it is, right? Like, it's so like I'm better than you kind of messaging, and I just don't stand for that. It's so disgusting. So my point of saying this is when you can get clear on what you do want and obsess over that and feel good over that and imagine how amazing it would feel when you get to have that amazing job when you walk in the door and you love the people you work with and you're getting paid. Oh my gosh. But the problem is sometimes we just don't feel worthy of all that joy and happiness. Like, how much better could it get? And that's the question we have to ask ourselves. But we tend to ask, how could it get worse? Like, oh, that's just my luck. No, how does it get better than this? And I don't know if your listeners are familiar with Gay Hendricks' The Big Leap. That's a great book to start
Mm.
with, which talks about our tolerance for joy and money and like to really step in and to allow ourselves that because what happens is like we like this person like I could use my friend as an example. Maybe she gets the job and she's like, "Oh God, I'm not worthy of this amazing position and I don't think I can even handle it." And then she self-sabotages and gets fired, right? Because we can't tolerate so much joy and ease and happiness and money and like how how can everything be so good? I'm used to my past from all the trauma I've been through of being having to work so hard and things were not easy and I was always alone and I was going through all this difficulty. So this doesn't match. So that's where the healing really comes in so that you can actually tolerate the beautiful life that you deserve and that you are able to create.
Thank you for giving that example, which is amazingly relevant. I think all of us can relate, whether we're
Mhm,
still working for someone else or not. Like, that is,
mhm.
yeah, I've been there. I
Yep.
have completely felt that. And then also this book recommendation, which is really good too, because that goes into this idea of like the upper limit of happiness and our fear of losing and all of that that can stop you. When people are listening and they're feeling this inspiration from hearing you speak and what you do, particularly I want to call forward the ones that are entrepreneurs or would be ones, people that feel really connected to what you're saying. Where can they find you? What are the ways that they can interact with you, work with you?
My website, emilyarons.com. I am probably most active on Instagram, on Facebook if you're on social media. On my website, we have all kinds of really great resources if you would like to go deeper. And I've got some really cool trainings that are free that if you're interested in joining, I'll be happy to share them with you. There's one that's coming up called Activate Your Abundance Mindset. So if you like this episode, you'll probably really like that training. My guess. So I'll give you the link for people to sign up and it's all free.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Emily, for sharing and for getting I love like how vivid you paint these different realities because I think it puts a fire under our like we're like ready to go, like you hear it and you think, why wouldn't I want this different reality? So thank you for really giving that level of inspiration and motivation today.